Come on, now my screen's all screwed up.
Likewise.
No, I don't
Oh,
want.
Jeanette, I think you're sharing your screen.
I don't know how. Where am I going to push that little button?
So at the if you kind of go towards the bottom, a bar will pop
Your
up.
screen sharing. Okay, see if I can do it on a. I don't know. You've got, now I need my magnifying glass and all that wonderful fun stuff. New share. I don't want to share, so get rid of it. Stop share. I got it. Oh dear Lord.
Would you mute, please, Jeanette?
I will. I thought beforehand. Okay, I've got to get back off, guys. I'm sorry. I'll do that.
Ask the indulgence of the public. We'll be back in a minute. Now it's my fault.
Mark, will you just keep a lookout for Jeanette in the waiting room, please?
She should be in now.
Awesome, thank you.
We can't see you, Jeanette. We can't hear you either.
But I've got to share screen with the green light and I don't want that.
You don't want that. You're down on the left. It should say video, start video. Right next to your mute
I've
button.
got it. I've got that. Okay.
You just turned it off again.
Oh,
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Let's get,
I was so good. I was there so early.
all right, let's get started.
Okay, yes, indeed.
I'm Daniel Drake, Chair of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Gasparo,
Here.
Jeanette Topham,
Here.
Tony Buscarin,
Here.
Andrea Planzer.
Here.
Airport staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tom Rafter, Airport Manager.
Here.
Noah Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager.
Here.
Lily Sylvia.
Here.
There are no other anticipated speakers on the agenda. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment towards the end of the meeting. For this meeting, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is convening by video conference via the Zoom app and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials for the meeting that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now, before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment or the public comment period, the chair will afford public comment as follows. NCTV will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. It is important to note that once the chat feature is activated, members of the public will need to refresh their YouTube webpage in order to access the chat. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address the questions or comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And we will proceed to the agenda. As I've already noted in the virtual meeting statement, this meeting is being both audio and video recorded. The most important announcement is that the airport will be holding a second PFAS public forum on November 20th, 2020 at 5 p.m. This will be held in the same format as last time, with essentially as a webinar and with the YouTube participation by the public. Again, that's November 20th at 5 p.m. Are there any comments or questions on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, it's approved. Seeing none. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes of October 13th, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or corrections? Hearing none, how do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
I'm going to abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We have redacted executive session minutes of October 13th, 2020 to consider for approval. Are there any comments or corrections? Is there a motion to approve the redacted executive session minutes of October 13th?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Gasparo. Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Abstained.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I will entertain a motion to ratify the warrants of October 21, 2020 and November 4th of 2020.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Mr. Rafter, do you want to take us through the pending leases and contracts?
Sure. The first is a lease amendment with Hangar Six Llc, which is owned by Mr. McGrath, and it's a $10,000 100 abatement for damage that was caused by the shared roof line damage to his ceiling. It's a little bit old, but we're getting around to the abatement on that. The next three are the car rental companies, and that's extending each of those by 1 year. There's a bit of a typo there, the comma in 15, it's not, it's $1,500 for the annual business fees for each of those. Next we have is a catering license with Island Kitchen, and that's a standard business fee, license agreement plus 25% catering fee. The next is the agreement with the town of Nantucket, Wannacomet Water Company for the water main extension into the Mitigation Valley Road area. Then we have a contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering, no cost, just simply extending the date for the fuel farm improvements. Then we have a contract with Stantec Consulting Services for $30,339 for design and creation of the specs for the terminal HVAC improvements. We have an amendment with the Levangie Electric Company for $6,615, and that's a change order to the Phase 1 security project. There are a number of additions and credits, and the net was at $6,615 to close out that project.
I'm going to take the intermunicipal agreement for the Nantucket water main extension out of this mix and discuss it in a moment. But I think it can't be in the blanket approval list. Are there any others that anybody wants to remove and discuss further? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the pending leases and contracts as described by Mr. Rafter, aside from the agreement with the town of Nantucket and the Wannacomet Water Company.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Topham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Through no fault of anybody's but my own, I just realized that I had the intermunicipal agreement for the water main extension in my possession this afternoon. So I went through it, and I would like to propose a couple of modifications. One are with respect to the language in paragraph 1.5, which refers to agreements between the commission, the airport commission, and the FAA. I believe the town should be included in that because it is a party to those agreements as well, certainly to the grant assurance agreements. And I think it should be included. The second technical change, and perhaps Mr. Carberg, you can address this, is how we're going to handle the agreements with each of the homeowners, which will presumably be a little bit different in each case. Is this going to be under the service agreement with the water company, or is there going to be a separate agreement?
I believe we would approach each homeowner with a separate service agreement that identified the easements that would be necessary, site restoration conditions, and various well abandonment or well disconnection issues that would be specific to each parcel.
All right, well, that makes sense, but should there be some reference in here to that agreement, to the fact that there will be that agreement?
I believe that's probably appropriate.
All right, would you take that up with council, please? And the third point is the water company's connection fee, which normally is $7,500, but I understand that they have agreed to waive $5,000 of that, and that the only connection fee they will charge for each house is $2,500, which essentially covers their costs. So I would propose that that be stated in this agreement as well, because there's really no place else to put it. So I would propose those three changes to the agreement as it's in your packet. And there is some urgency in getting this signed and underway. So I should ask, does anybody else have any questions or comments on that, on the agreement? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agreement with the three changes that I've outlined, and that it will be signed in the normal fashion after those changes are made.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. I should note that, thank you, and we'll go ahead and get those changes made, and, you know, two of you, in addition to I, will sign it, so you can double check when the time comes. I was concerned that maybe we're talking about, you know, upwards of 90 connection fees, but we're really only talking about those cases where the house has more than 20 parts per trillion of PFAS in the water. So we're maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 ultimately. Any other questions on that?
No.
Thank you. Moving on. Capital approval process, home rule petition.
Yes, the home rule petition has been sent to the state for their action. And we've been informed by the town manager that this is a very lengthy process, has to go through the legislature. Could take up to a year or 2 years or more, and then requires a governor's signature. So we're going to begin engaging with our representatives to try to keep that moving and just stay after them as much as we can on it. On the PFAS investigation, you have the updated template, and I'll turn it over to Noah to provide you with some more detail on what's happening with PFAS.
Thank you, Tom. Referencing the status table, there have been some updates since the later October subcommittee meeting and select board meeting where this was last presented. For a summary, we have 77 access agreements that have been sent to residents. 70 have been returned and fully executed. 173 samples have been taken over 72 individual private wells. Results to date are as follows: 68 wells, 68 wells have been sampled. 22 samples resulted in no detection. 24 samples resulted where PFAS was detected, but the detection was under 20 parts per trillion. 15 samples where PFAS was detected at levels greater than 20 parts per trillion, but less than 200 parts per trillion. And 7 samples where PFAS was detected exceeding 200 parts per trillion. The airport has installed, via its consultant, 12 POET systems. We pursued a DCAM waiver and received that waiver for 5 additional systems, as was indicated by our October sampling results. Excuse me. And through the consultant, we're pursuing pricing and quotation for those 5 additional systems. 42 residences are supplied with bottled water. And a step-out sampling was performed last week of 5 homes with anticipated results on the 18th of this month or possibly later, depending on analysis and transmittal times.
Were those homes the ones that, did those homes all return the access agreement? So,
Yes.
so the point is the outstanding access agreements are getting quite old, relatively speaking.
They are. I'd agree with
We
that.
do about those eventually.
Dan, I think it's all relevant as we continue to step out. We send out more access agreements. So I think we're fairly up to date on most. I don't know if they're that old or not, but I have to look.
The oldest ones have cycled through. We have finally sampled all Matacasham Valley Road homes. Inevitably, there end up being some recalcitrant homeowners that just take a little while to contact. I don't think it's...
So there's no reason to be concerned at this point.
Not yet.
Okay.
I wanted to provide an update on what's the acronym is the IRA. The airport's IRA status report, or immediate response action, has been uploaded to the airport's PFAS website and DEP's website. You'll recall that we through the consultant, we submit these monthly to the DEP, and it's really our administrative record on our investigation and response. This document is typically fairly routine in that it identifies in much more detail the information I just related to you in the report. Action steps taken and areas for next direction. This most recent report for October contains additional information, notably the identification of a new AFFF release site by a third party. It is a long report, but you can find that information in section 3.5, either through our website or through DEP's website. For the water line, the water main extension, you just discussed the agreements. We've also just today received an updated plan for the water main extension, which will be the basis for design. It's only very slightly changed from the item that you've seen before. The route minimizes the number of easements required, and it identifies the portions that will be directional drilled as opposed to trenched and filled. The goal is to avoid the number of easements and minimize the impacts to MESA habitat in order to expedite the construction schedule. The next major step would be the project notification form submittal to MESA for their review. And we've also tasked the consultant with returning some updated scheduling estimates to us, which we will pass along. Later in the agenda, you'll see the water service draft policy for your review and comment for homes west of the airport where water mains are available at the curb. Currently for about 5 or 6 properties. It's brief but important, an important policy document for the Airport Commission, since the airport will be funding utility improvements on private property. It relies on staff and the consultant to identify and document site-specific conditions at each site, such as the well abandonment and disconnection issues. The only item that I bring forward additionally for your consideration is if you see changes that you would like made, I would ask that you consider if these can be delegated to the chair to make instead of waiting for the next commission meeting. For the last item I have is an update on the soils investigation. Starting next week, the airport and its consultant will be performing soil sampling at all of our known AFFF release sites to test for PFAS in soil, and if it's there, to characterize its distribution by depth. We are also working with a tenant to perform investigative sampling on their leasehold, which will involve both water and soil sampling. And we will continue to update on when those results are scheduled for receipt. And that's my PFAS report.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, Ms. Topham, please go ahead.
I got a phone call from somebody who is concerned about what is happening on Evergreen and Daffodil, and I don't know, east, west, south, or whatever direction. So can you address that to make the customer or client feel a little bit better? What is actually happening?
So the short answer, and I'll explain in more detail, is that the airport, through its consultant, is performing what's called step-out sampling. As the airport initially sampled homes immediately west of the airport, when results were found exceeding 20 parts per trillion, the licensed site professional would identify a next ring of homes to step the sampling out to. And it's happened a couple of times. It seems roughly every 5 homes that are sampled, 1 or 2 of them will result in an exceedance of 20 parts per trillion. And we've performed a couple iterations of step-out sampling. We're now down into the Evergreen area. We have 5 homes, I believe, that have been identified for this next round of step-out sampling because contamination exceeding thresholds was found between their residence and the airport. We've discussed this with our LSP. We follow very strictly and very expeditiously the format that's prescribed in the MCP. As a regulated party, this is how the MCP mandates that investigations go forward. Eventually, it's possible we might reach a point where we find PFAS contaminations that are far enough out that are mandated by step-out sampling, but it's no longer realistic that they could be in the airport's sphere of responsibility. The best answer that I could get from our consulting group, and it's a good one, is these are one-off situations that we would have to address with the DEP. But in the interim, we continue to sample as it's best directed by the LSP according to Mass DEP regulations. Is there anything I can clean up or elucidate on that?
Well, I know that they've met the maximum or whatever, so she's getting the water, they're getting the water and stuff, but they wanted to know what the next step was going to be for their particular property. And maybe they should just call you, do you think?
Yes, I think ultimately I'd like to look at their sample results with the LSP so I can tell them specifically what would be the next steps for their specific property.
Okay. Thank you.
Or until those results are received, I can walk them through what the categories are and what the different categories mean as far as under 20, between 20 and 200, etc.
Okay, thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Gasparo?
Just briefly on the water main. This is great. I'm very encouraged to see the level of work that's gone into this and the mapping. I am wondering why there's so much directional drilling proposed. You mentioned for avoidance of rare plants and then matters related to easements. And but I guess I'm just not quite clear. Is the opinion of council that if you directional drill under the property that the easement is not required, which doesn't seem to really make sense, but I'm not an attorney. Knowing the expense that directional drilling the 12-inch line, and when you look at the figure, so many starts and stops, I just really want to be sure that we've investigated that and we're not just being pushed into doing it one way.
Mm-hmm.
That could be, multiples of expense if in fact, we would be able to perhaps with some a little bit of work and maneuvering actually obtain some permissions, or have we fully investigated? I know this is the first time we've seen it, but before it becomes fully codified, I think that this is how it's going to be done. That's my question. And then would either you be able to put that up and share that figure, or I have it on my other screen and I'd be happy to if that was appropriate, whatever you feel.
So to answer the second question, if you have it available, it's
sure. And it's the one that
to share.
Everybody knows it was within the exhibit of our contracts. So it's from the packet. This is not new information. There we go. Can everybody see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So as you can see, there are many spots where we're going to go from open cut to directional drill, back underground, directional drill. And I think originally we had been discussing whether the directional drilling was going to be focused, as related to the runway operation. And then we've got some rare plants here. And I know our consultants are working on this. I just think it's a good discussion to have to be sure that, and I do really am very interested in the opinion related to how going under someone's property, but still is within their property, negates the easement issue. I'm not expecting you to answer that tonight, but I find it curious. And then my one other point is that in this.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt you, Mr. Gasparo? Do you have an answer on that, Mr. Garberg?
Yes, I can. So the first, I think that's a very good observation. The longest single stretch of directional drilling is across the runway safety area, and that's related to an operational construction concern. There are parts along Mitigation Valley Road where, because of the existence of paper street conveyance to private property, to avoid having to do an easement, the consultant has looked to traverse airport property that's listed priority habitat. So I believe it's not that we would be going underneath a private property, we would be going around that private property, but through priority habitat. So utilizing directional drilling in that location would mitigate the need for more extensive permitting and impacts to rare species. On your screen, there's a little bump out. If you travel to the right along the proposed water main way, the northmost bump out where it says began 12-inch HDP water line. That specific directional drilling component is to avoid private property. The other issue is with bordering Nantucket Island's land bank land. I believe that pushes the water main into another area of priority habitat. I believe the land bank may not be able to give easements. So we're looking at directional drilling for the habitat related components related to that to avoid having to pass onto land bank property. I'm saying that I think you have a better functional understanding of easements than I do, but I think that explains the items where directional drilling was indicated by the consultant versus the trench and fill. The costs that were associated with these, I believe it was the figure was given of $100 a foot for trench and fill and $175 a foot for directional drilling.
Thank you. So to that, it seems that the directional drill is being driven in there's two matters. One, operationally related to the runway, makes a ton of sense. Two, priority habitat, I guess I'm not completely convinced. You've identified plants here, so that makes sense, but a lot of this is within the traveled way. And I guess if we've already found plants here and not here, why are we starting and stopping at such almost twice the cost just because it might be priority habitat if it doesn't, contain any, species of concern. And again, I don't expect this answer tonight. I just want to throw out there that I want to be sure that we're looking at this closely, given the kind of cost, $175 a foot. It's versus the 100. If it in fact can be open trenched, it should. And then my one other comment is in this area right here. I would just like to be sure that we look at, obviously erosion is going to take all of these homes, and we are going to have to, the water has to be provided until the last home is gone, essentially, which is going to be this house. And I just want to be sure we look at right in here that, again, erosion is not perfectly linear along the shoreline, but, should we be considering a slightly different route just to make sure we don't potentially have a break in the line before the last house is served? So I just would ask you to just take that into account. It's probably close, but, and this isn't going to be our problem, and this is it, but as we're thinking about the future, we want to make sure that the water main essentially outlasts the structures being served.
I think those are good comments, and I'll take them back to the consultant.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. I guess the next item is the water.
If I may, he had covered me. The one other comment I did have was related to the new IRA, and I would encourage all commissioners to read that, and specifically the section 3.5 with the new information, because it's somewhat concerning.
Has everybody seen those photographs? Did you send them to the whole commission, Noah?
I send them to Mr. Rafter, yourself, and the vice chair.
Why don't you send them to the other three, please?
Copy that.
Thank you. Okay, water service policy.
Noah kind of teed this one up. Again, this is a policy to guide us as to how the airport will handle connecting homeowners to the existing water main in the vicinity of Evergreen Way. There are a number of individual specific details that we'll have to deal with for each property. But this is essentially a draft policy, and as Noah mentioned earlier, we're open to comments, questions, changes, but we just ask that whatever the commissioners decide, that we allow the chairman to approve this at a later date or once those changes are made. Again, the objective here, I think, is to get those folks that are close to an existing water main that have exceeded the 20 parts per trillionth onto town water service as soon as possible.
Any comments or questions on the policy? Here, I actually have one. I think the paragraph that's headed policy should define residents affected by PFAS contamination as those whose wells test at greater than 20 parts per trillion. Because I think if we don't, it's going to leave people a lot of wiggle room. The only concern with that is if, somebody who's at 17 or 18 parts per trillion and the DEP says, well, you probably ought to hook them up too. So I think if we say 20 parts per trillion or as directed by the DEP, that would satisfy me. I don't know how others feel about that.
I think that makes
Just for
sense.
clarity, if I may, and to put out there, the requirement for the connection by DEP currently is in excess of that threshold, correct?
Correct. But they may, if somebody continually tests at 19, they may say, well, you should do this. I don't want to create a spitting contest with them.
I agree with the second clause that I think covers that.
I do too. I agree.
I'm sorry, the second clause, which?
In your statement.
Oh,
that,
in my statement.
or as directed by Mass DEP.
Right. Okay. Everybody in agreement with that?
Yes,
Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the policy with that change?
I'll make that motion.
Is there thank you, Ms. Topham. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Plancer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Mr. Rafter, lease payments and abatements and deferments?
Yeah, we're continuing to work with Crosswinds to obtain an amicable solution to the impacts that they've had on COVID. And I will hope to have something by next month, but we're having challenge communications with them. If I may, Dan, go on to some other financial issues.
Go ahead.
Just a note for the commissioners, the October fuel sales were up 45%, or $262,429 over last October. That's very good news, but it's also just beginning to make up for the loss of the 1.6 million that we sustained in the first 3 months of the summer. So good news, but we got to maintain it. If you don't mind, I can go right into the budget draft.
Go ahead.
And I'd like to note that this is a rough draft for the FY22 budget. Due to the condensed schedule and some recent events such as COVID, PFAS, and maternity, there may be some items that require further attention. We fully understand that. We're just we're looking to propose a final budget at the next meeting. So if you could take a look at this, and if you have any comments, please provide them to us prior to the meeting and we'll address them. But as you know, Jamie's very particular about her work, so we want to make sure that everything's addressed. But in general, with the $2,172,000 assistance from the CARE Act, we can present a balanced budget for FY22. However, the CARES Act will be depleted after the FY22. Revenue projections, you can see that the actual for FY20 came in at 10 million. When the pandemic originally hit, the FY21 budget was revised down to 5.5 million. However, based on actual results in this current fiscal year, we're now estimating revenues for 22 budget to be 7.6 million. And again, that includes 2.1 million in CARES Act. The expenses, the actual for FY20 was 9.3. The revised COVID budget increased expenses slightly to 9.4 due to some precautionary measures and added PPE that we needed to address the COVID-related issues. We're proposing a $10 million expense budget for 22, driven primarily by moving forward with positions that we are backfilling that we had been deferring for a number of years, such as the security coordinator, the ops position, and maintenance supervisor. And so with a revenue of 7.6 million, expense of 10, we're projecting a negative net earnings of 2.5 million, which will be covered through the standard $400,000 PFC transfer and the 2.1 million CARES Act funding. I want to note that the PFC transfer, we're still able to do that, but due to, and I'll get into this in statistics later, with the decline in our employments, we are seeing a significant decline in PFCs. So we'll be able to maintain this 400,000 probably for another couple of years, but we have to keep an eye on that. Given the certified retained earnings balance is 3.5 million as of July 1st, 2019, the additional surplus and other transfers in and out, we're projecting a fund balance of 2.9 million. I've asked about most recent retained earnings, and they're discussing it, but they have not been certified, is the answer I received. Additionally, the fuel revolver balance is projected to be about 1.2 million for FY20, but we're going to need a significant portion of that to help fund the rehabilitation project. And again, I'll get into that in a minute, but the bids came in at about $1.4 million above our estimates. So we have to go find money, and we're going to be rebidding that project. We also continue to fund the stabilization fund, which has a beginning balance for FY21 of $442,000. We were going to transfer an additional 100,000 at the 2020 ATM. However, due to the limited warrant articles and the modified COVID ATM, the transfer didn't happen. So we'll be making those recommendations later this year with the budget transfers. You'll also see in the summary the use of, again, 6.2 million CARES Act grant, how that was distributed. And it's critical to getting us through the FY22. There was a portion in FY20, big chunk in 21, and it'll take us through 22. Also, the PFCs have been updated through September 30th. And I just want to note, you may recall we had a major capital request for PFAS. And at this time, the debt service for PFAS in 22 will be a bond anticipation note, and we would expect to take that long-term in FY23, when hopefully we can get some more money to it. So we're not taking as big of a chunk long-term, but it's going to be a massive, not massive, but a significant long-term debt service we're going to have with the PFAS. Any questions on the budget?
I have one, if I may.
Go ahead.
Related to the line item for professional services, does that increase, is that related to the PFAS, some of the PFAS services, or do you have that separated out?
No, the PFAS is in there. That's what's driving the majority of that increase.
And but though we're tracking it for any future reasons to keep that separate as well, or should we be I guess the question might be, for something like this, should there be a sub line item for professional services related to that particular matter?
We'll have to look into whether it should be a sub, but we are working on setting up a structure that can break out all of those costs so that we can, if need be, go recapture accordingly. whether it's through PRPs or whatever other method.
I don't know. In that case, is it necessary to break them out as a separate line item, or maybe the other way to do it would just be every quarter, say, furnish the commission with the updated sort of outstanding balance on that account?
Yeah, I'll talk to Jamie because again, we're working with the consultant to try to figure out how we're going to format this again so that it's clear that if we have to go back and assess fees to people, how that's being delineated.
Thank you.
You don't need any approval right now, right?
No, that will be at the next meeting, but I would ask again that if you take a look and have any other questions or comments, please send them to us and we will make sure we get the answers out to everybody and get that addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. The manager's report, project updates.
Okay, Taxiway Echo, progress continues with the projects on or about schedule. They're expected to complete their work probably between the 17th and 19th. They have encountered an issue though that is similar. It's a subsurface issue that we saw when you may recall, we did a patch on Taxiway Alpha where we were basically seeing some sinking and the subsurface was really bad. There was some flowable fill and other things. Well, they've encountered some additional sections of that. They're working to develop a plan to not only address the fix, but also try to determine, where the end of this is going to be. And they're working closely with FAA on that as well, and Chuck Larson. So it's going to require a change order most likely from FAA, but it is being addressed properly in the field, and there may be a slight operational impact through the winter if they can't come up with a solution within the next week or so. The Security Phase 2 project, multiple submittals have been reviewed and approved. Work is scheduled to begin next week. And just a reminder, the project includes cameras, some door work, some duct bank connectivity between the terminal, the FBO, and the RF buildings. The fuel farm rehabilitation, as I mentioned before, we received bids on the project. It came in 1.4 million over estimate. We've had discussions with Brian Turbot, who has also conferred with town council, and we're essentially we're going to rebid this project. We believe that to be the cleanest, most effective way, and regroup and see where we can come up with the funding for that. The EIR, just a reminder, the purpose of the document is to meet both state and federal environmental review requirements for capital projects and identify where they meet relevant environmental impact thresholds. The outcome is to obtain federal and state agreement that there'd be no significant impact to the environment as a result of our projects. The subcommittee reviewed a package of draft and draft final chapters for the EIR. And although I was on vacation during the meeting, it's my understanding that there were some concerns expressed relating to the expansion of the South Apron project, including noise berm and concerns over lighting levels and emissions. We're working to develop a lighting policy that would identify the specific goals of the ramp lighting in an effort to address or minimize the impacts to the surrounding community neighborhoods. However, based on these discussions, an order of magnitude cost for the noise berm has been established to be about $700,000. Additionally, it's been identified that including the noise berm would cause the CIP projects to exceed a 5 acre significance threshold for disturbance to this habitat type. The current engineer's estimate for this mitigation is upwards of $468,000. And that's based on 7.8 acres of total CIP project disturbance mitigated at a ratio of 2 to 1 at a cost of $30,000 per acre. And that is based on conversations with Mesa and a value of $30,000 from historical information at the vineyard, which we may be a little low on that. Including the berm and the EIR is likely committing us to performing the mitigation identified as a cost of about 468, whether the project is constructed or not. Now, I understand there's and appreciate the community concern that these efforts are attempting to mitigate, but I must caution the impacts of requiring these efforts in direct relationship with the apron expansion. And it may have severe long-term financial sustainability consequences on the airport. And let me explain this. Currently, our CIP is indicating a $10.5 million participation from FAA discretionary funding for the South Apron expansion in the federal fiscal year of 23, and an additional $45 million in discretionary monies critical airfield projects in subsequent years. Should the airport or town, if we end up into a subsidy situation, which is a likely scenario, not approve or accept a grant for the South Apron due to whatever the reason may be relating to the construction of this berm, it could jeopardize a $55 million discretionary funds program for the airport. So where I'm looking at this is if we include it in the EIR, we're somewhat committing to the cost for the mitigation, but it also demonstrates a level of commitment to the community that, you know, we're kind of putting some money on the table here. My only concern is that it not become an absolute 100% requirement tied to the South Apron until we know for certain what the financial situation is and what approvals are received. Now, it's a commission's decision. We can tie it together. We can either throw it out of the EAEIR. I don't think I want to recommend that, but we could keep it in the EAEIR, proceed with the understanding that the mitigation is going to, you know, cost us some money, but I don't know how to word or not word the exact relationship to the South Apron. I don't want to jeopardize critical discretionary funding, because once you turn down discretionary funds from the feds, you get way back in the line and you won't see it for multiple years. So that's the only caution I want to put out there. And I'd be glad to accept any direction the commission wishes to give us on this.
Mr. Gasparo, do you want to say something?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I was going to bring this up under subcommittee reports, but it seems that if everyone's all right, this would be the appropriate place. We did have extensive discussion as the environmental subcommittee on this matter, and the subcommittee's recommendation is that the berm is included within the EAEIR as a mitigation component. I'm not sure I would continue to call it a noise berm. I think it serves to mitigate you know, many of the environmental effects. And so it's more of a mitigation berm related to, you know, noise, emissions, and lighting, all of which the current EAEIR, this proposal currently put forth by our consultants very specifically states there is no mitigation for all of the EAEIR proposed. And so as related to noise and emissions. Now, plants are going to be a different, you know, matter and how that works out through natural heritage. I think that we could get to a place with a berm design that actually is an enhancement, depending upon the plants that we use. Again, we're talking about a berm which would be vegetated. So there are plants that are beneficial to certain species, and you know, if we didn't just make it a grass berm but actually came up with a you know, a planting plan, the footprint that it was replacing, it could be similar, and again, I think enhanced. I think that it's important for us as a commission to include the berm as a mitigation component for the expansion that's proposed. We had the noise study that we did last year that did show that the ramp is going to, you know, have increased noise levels to the surrounding neighborhood. And I think that it's important that the commission is, absolutely goes forward with the project, but that the project has a mitigation component. And I would like to, see that included. Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
On the berm, what evidence do we have, or what kind of studies or whatever that a berm would help with any of these things, the noise or the emissions, and the degree that it would help? And what kind of berm?
That's the only part of your question I can answer, but it's an earth, what's proposed is an earth berm.
Was the only part I can answer too.
I mean, why would we do it unless we have some evidence that it would actually help with those things? And
Noah, or I could refer to you, but the study that was done last year demonstrated that there would be a reduction in decibel levels to the surrounding neighborhood through the construction of the berm. Further, section 7.3625 of the draft is mitigation measures. And to quote, while the berm is not currently proposed for construction, if constructed, it would help buffer the adjacent neighborhood from ground aviation uses of the expanded apron. So it is stated, within the document. I could go, further into some of the specific sections, but I think that the draft really needs to go to the commission, and hopefully you can spend some time with it. There are a whole bunch of projects included with the EAIR, of which, I know that I'm supportive of all of the projects. I just hope that this particular aspect of this one project, that we include some level of mitigation for how this may impact our community.
May I ask a question? And I should know this,
Mr. Rafter.
but I apologize. Noah, if you know the answer. Time frame on when we would need the 400,000 or 500,000 for the mitigation. What are we looking at? Do we know?
We don't know exactly. The best guess is sometime within the first 3 years of the 5-year capital timeframe. Part of it may be able to be staged, but we can't say for sure if it's all upfront year one or if it's staged over years 1, 2, and 3.
Can you find that out?
We talked about this. We wouldn't know until the outcome of future discussions with MISA. I would characterize them as discussions, but we wouldn't be able to find that out for a few months.
And I'm the only reason I'm asking, I'm trying to look at our future financial situation and, taking PFAS long-term, what the cost of that's going to be, the additional $1.4 million on the fuel farm, all of which is all airport money, no funding sources other than our own. And I just, again, we do what we're told to do. Just every time I go to ask Jamie for another $500,000 or $1 million, it gets a little harder each time.
I would, if I may, I would also add that, this EAIR process is about to kick off a very public rollout of all of these projects of the mitigation. We're going to have a public meeting. We're going to invite public comment. The document goes out to, several state, federal agencies. And I think that as a commission, by agreeing to something like this, we really put our best foot forward before all of those comments come in to show that we're being proactive and including a mitigation aspect. I mean, it's going to come up during the process. And as of right now, it's something that we would like to do. And I think the decision that needs to be made is it's something that we're committed to do.
I'm concerned about that. We just assume that this is the mitigation, that it would do what we want it to do, whatever we want it to do. Does it help with emissions? I don't see how that even goes together. I know you said noise and emissions, and there was a third one, but
Lighting.
If,
Lighting.
And would that help with that? I mean, if you're jumping in and saying, let's do a berm, we don't know that that's the proper mitigation. There are so many different ones you can do. All airports have tons of them. Why, you know, we just decide on a berm because it sounds good? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like there needs to be a little more.
Sure. If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, we've discussed this for quite a few years, going back to the capital improvement plan, whether it should be a wall, you know, what kind of mitigation strategy would be included between the aviation uses and the surrounding neighborhood. And the recommended, and there's a list of alternatives within the document, and the berm was considered, I think, to be the most cost effective in terms of the hope would be that we're going to strip the topsoil from this area that we're going to, and subsoil from the area that we're going to construct an apron anyway. And then we're going to kind of push it up on the end. And, you know, there's more to it than that. We'll bring material in as well. But in terms of if we're going to include some mitigation strategy, there's also, I think, an aesthetic to that versus, you know, you could think of some of the noise berms that are mitigation measures that you may see along the sides of highways and walls. We've had discussions going back for years about those sort of things and how, you know, the challenges that something like that might face on Nantucket. Would it have to be shingled, covered with vegetation, cost per foot related to that, height, aesthetics, and it seemed that the preferred alternative being essentially, you know, something that remains, you know, green and vegetated to a height of 15 feet. And to your point, what they were looking at was, and there is on the plan, there is, you know, the consultants have developed essentially a 15-foot high berm, taken into account that it would be in the vicinity of the height of the engines. In other words, you're trying to interrupt that plane, that horizontal plane at that level. That's not to say there wouldn't be a jet that doesn't have a motor above that. But again, I think in a mitigation strategy, we're trying to provide some buffering. It's still going to be an airport. There's still going to be noise. It's to say that, you know, as we come forward with an expansion project, that we are including some, what I believe to be a reasonable approach to this, understanding that the expense needs to be factored in.
if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Please, Mr. Rafter.
Arthur, I hear what you're saying. I just want to caution, and I like, you know, we talked about the idea of scraping up the dirt and putting it into a pile, but we're also now finding out that some of that dirt may be PFAS contaminated, which increase the cost of everything. As with every project we do, you know, there's always going to be additional costs. That change order I mentioned to the runway job right now at this point in time is around 500,000. And that's only for the small area that we're in, not in any of the other phases. I just wonder, and this is a commission's decision, are we presupposing the level of concern and its impact based on given circumstances? Meaning, if in fact we go through a public hearing process, and yes, there, you know, we've talked about it, we know it, and there's a level of concern that we have to do this, then we have to do it. But let me run a scenario by you where things might change a little too. And again, it all depends on the timing of this. If in fact we run into a financial problem, which right now is in the foreseeable future, where the town might be subsidizing the airport, this issue might become more of an island-wide subject matter, and at an ATM vote, not be seen as favorable as the local community might see it. I'm just putting that out there. So whether or not we include it now, or we have the public meeting and say, okay, we've heard your concerns, we're going to put it in. I don't know. I'm just, you know, putting it out there for a suggestion.
I'm in it. Mr. Carberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up to the Vice Chair's comment. I do want to support him on a factual matter about the berm. As it's designed in the EA, it is anticipated to have positive impacts on aircraft noise based on the distance from the engines, the height of the engines. We had this conversation with Mr. Doucette at FAA New England, New England region. He believes that noise berms can work and do work, but he said on a basis you don't tend to see a lot of them because they don't trigger FAA eligibility requirements. They end up being in the situation we are in now, where they tend to be a sponsor's responsibility, and it's a lot of money for the sponsor to put forward. Just as it is, that's where we find ourselves now. It ends up being it ends up being an expensive proposition, but it does work.
I'm going to jump in here. First of all, I don't think we should make a decision on this tonight. Realistically, we could make a decision in December. And I think we all have a lot to think about. I would just like to put in my 2 cents, which is that while it's a bit like arguing against motherhood and apple pie, I've been concerned about this all along. The fact that all of a sudden the cost has jumped from 600,000 to 700,000 to $1.1 million, $1.2 million, when you add the mitigation onto it, gives me great pause. I was sort of prepared to go along with the 600,000 or 700,000, but I just don't think it's responsible. I mean, in this day and age, when we've got a lot of things coming at us which we don't know the cost of, and this is it's a wonderfully nice thing to have, but it's not a necessary thing to have. And I think we've got enough things that are necessary to have that we need to wait to commit. I'm willing to commit now to the mitigation step, but I personally would prefer not to commit to the commitment to the berm at this point, because I just think it's not necessarily in the best interest of the airport and its fiscal soundness to do that. So I'll put that on the table as the other view. And as I say, unless somebody feels we should go ahead and make a decision tonight, I think maybe we should sleep on it. And if we have any further questions, address them to Mr. Carberg, and he can get the answers back to us. And then we'll deal with it at the December meeting. Mr. Gasparo?
My understanding was that we needed to decide tonight because we have to have the final document for approval by the commission at the next meeting in December. So if we can't give our consultants direction right now to finalize this document, then how are we going to have a final document in December to vote on? So I feel like, again, we're always getting pushed into these things, I feel like, but if we put it off, what happens in December? Do we have to put off the vote on the final document? What direction is the staff able to give the consultant? And, the document's going to take a very different, or I should say a very different, but they're going to be able to refine it based on input from the commission if they know that this is to be included. Whereas I guess in a month that might not happen. So that would be my point on that, was that I feel like we sort of do need to decide the mitigation costs also. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have to mitigate 2 to 1 for this entire footprint. Those are just a possibility. The fact of the matter is that the environmental studies, as I understand it from this area, did not in fact turn up occurrences of endangered species. And we are not replacing the footprint of this area with any kind of, impervious or hard surface. And I think by I think that the process with natural heritage can be a beneficial one, and that there is a strong case to make that this in fact doesn't require 2-to-1 mitigation. And perhaps Mr. Carberg has a different take on that, but I don't see that this automatically is going to be another $400,000.
Well, that was, as I understand it, that was the consultant's estimate.
If
There may have been conditions to that, but that's what I am told is the consultant's estimate. Mr. Rafter, on the timing issue, would it be too late to approve this in December?
I don't think it's too late, but I see where Arthur's coming from, and I was wondering if it's, do we have at least 2 alternatives to present at the December meeting? And the commission can vote on inclusion of X or Y, or even a hybrid, and then direct them to, we approve it with those conditions. I don't know.
Is that reasonable, Mr. Gasparo?
it is, if that in fact works with the consultants, I mean, you're essentially, this is a very detailed document. So, obviously there will be some time between the commission, but based on the meeting we had with the consultants, they were telling us, and their push is related to the FAA funding schedule and having to meet deadlines for, I think it's in May or so.
That's very true, yes.
And this process kicks off a public notice process for then, so there's statutory timelines once you file this application that will continue to push things out. And so I think that that's part of what we're up against. I did just want to answer one other thing too. And I know you may not all have this document, but when you do get it, if you note page 7-44 related to the South Apron, and specifically through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Planzer, there is the alternatives analysis. The study evaluated 4 design alternatives, including 3 mitigation alternatives and an alternative without mitigation. So this has been, thoroughly studied and, worked out in terms of that introducing the 15-foot tall, 2,600-foot long barrier would reduce noise by 3 to 6 decibels max at several receptors along the barrier. And and again, I think that goes back to also the study that we did last year. So there is a benefit. There has been alternatives looked at. And one of the other ones was the use of ground power units in lieu of auxiliary power units. The introduction of a perimeter noise barrier. In other words, I take it that would mean sort of your highway type of a wall. And then the introduction of the earthen berm, if you will.
All right, what's the pleasure of the commission? Does somebody want to make a motion as to whether we consider this tonight or finally next month?
I'll make a motion to include the earth berm.
Is there a second?
Do we need to make,
That's what I'm asking. Do we, that was what I was really asking, was do we need to make a decision tonight? Do we want to make a decision tonight, or do we want to put it off until the December meeting, with the understanding that we need in the meantime to provide guidance to the consultant to give us basically the 2 options?
I'm fine with that as well.
right, what's that, Tom's idea of doing the different scenarios, or
That's what I'm essentially talking about. I may not have said it as well.
that's what I,
So you're directing us to direct the consultant to provide the alternative with the berm in and as it is today, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
I'm amenable to that.
I would support that.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
do we need to vote on that?
No, if everybody's content with it. Ms. Topham, how do you feel?
I'm fine with it.
Mr. Biscarin, did you say you were all right with it?
Yes, I am. I'd like to know what the two alternatives are, but I think we should move ahead on giving some direction to our experts on this situation to vote on it now.
So to expand on that, Dan, I would ask Noah, when we direct the consultants, that we have it, something to the commissioners well in advance of the next meeting so they have a chance to review that.
Exactly.
Please, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you turn on the chat, please, NCTV?
Do you
No,
want
we're
me-
not going to go right to public comment, but just to give people a chance to comment.
Oh, okay.
And remember, if you are going to use the chat feature, please refresh your browser on YouTube. Mr. Rafter, go ahead.
Also, we received the drainage plan. We're working on some minor changes, but I've also directed the maintenance department to develop a compatible maintenance schedule and also use it for capital planning purposes. The ALP change for non-standard geometry issues, we've received the scope of work and we're reviewing that. We have a meeting this Friday on it. Hangar development, we're working with 3 possible interested parties on various types of hangar development. Have a call Thursday with legal to review some draft leases. On the RFP bid situation, the RFP for additional land at Bunker Road is ready to go to the town. We received the surveyor's drawing. Once the town approves that, that'll be issued to the public. We spoke about the car rental agreements. ATM warrant articles. We currently have 2, and one is the rental car bylaws. We're working with our attorneys, and they're going to be coordinating with John Giorgio in town to update the town bylaws. We're also going to be looking at another warrant article for extending terms associated with hangar development. We're hearing back from these developers that 20 years is not sufficient for them to amortize their investment. So one I know is looking for 40 years, and we have to see if we can do that. But that just triggered a memory here. When we were discussing those easements out in the Mattoxan Valley Road area, my recollection is that any easement must go to a town meeting. So no, we need to keep that in mind. If we have any need for an easement, we need to get a placeholder in for a warrant article and get the specifics down to Libby by December 9th at the latest. On the operations side of the house, as I mentioned earlier, the October sales and fuel were up significantly, and I just want to give a shout out to the ops department because they handled it tremendously, especially given the fact that all of the seasonal employees have left. So they did a great job making us some extra money there.
Was a great majority of that activity over the Columbus Day weekend? Or was it spread out?
It was all over, but there was a significant hit on Columbus Day. We're also keeping an eye on national events, which could make our annual Thanksgiving VIP visitor, Mr. Biden, a bit more interesting, whether it's president-elect or whatever. We have not heard anything yet. The police department hasn't heard anything, but we're going to stay tuned for that. Also, the ops and maintenance department very instrumental in keeping the project Taxiway Echo moving along, and we're working to prepare for the winter season in accordance with our snow and ice control plan. I can go through these statistics quickly. Operations are down 18.2 over last September year to date.
Excuse me, Mr. Rafter, I wouldn't do the individual airport statistics, but just the overall.
Okay, again, the one big one I want to point out is the employments are down year to date 62.67%, which relates to 54,593 employments. That equates to about 239,000 in PFCs. So just in the first 3 months of the fiscal year, we're taking a hit of almost 240,000 in PFCs. Dan, I would like to just capture some of the major market shares.
Okay.
The, let's see here, the Boston market overall is a decrease of 45%. Cape Air decreased, I'm sorry, was 62% or 3,470 passengers. The Washington National was down 43% or 463 passengers. The Hyannis market for September, very interesting. Overall market was up 29% or 256 passengers. So that's the second month in a row that we've seen an increase in the Hyannis traffic, which is good news. JFK overall is down 67 or 3,476 passengers. And LaGuardia was down 14% or 101 passengers. Southern still doing very well. They had a 66% increase in Providence service. The jet fuel sold in September was up 0.4%. Year to date, still down about 14%. And for October, it was up 76%, or 57,000 gallons. The avgas was down 5.25% for September. Year to date 22. For October, was up 6.5%. So we're seeing an interesting shift here in, this late summer, early fall traffic bump. Freight's up 13.2 over last September and 5% year to date. And noise complaints are down from last year, from 38 last year to 27 this year. And one other note on the personnel side, we had a customer service representative resign, and we're working to replace that position in the FBO. We did have, while I was away, a COVID-related event in the FBO. Apparently, I think it was a passenger that had made contact with somebody who had tested positive. The staff did a tremendous job. They followed all the protocols, shut things down, came in, used our electrostatic cleaner, did all the cleaning, took all the precautions, notified everybody, and we're back up and operating fairly swiftly. So I was very proud to see that they followed the book and did everything great while I was away. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Rafter? All right. Commissioners' comments. Ms. Planzer, do you have any?
No, I don't.
Ms. Garin?
Tony, you're muted.
You remoted you? He said no.
No.
Ms. Topham?
No,
Mr. Gasparo?
I just wanted to follow up with on the subcommittee report from the environmental subcommittee. I think I'm not going to go into anything related to the EAIR. I think we covered most of that. But there was one other topic that we which we reviewed, which was the stormwater report that we received, and it's really impressive. And I would just, if I could just share one page of it with the commission in case you haven't seen it, if that's okay with everybody, if I just share my screen. Yeah. This document right here is sort of a snapshot inventory of the catch basins and the stormwater infrastructure on the airport, and the different conditions based upon the work that Jacobs did. And this really sets up, I think, an important framework, as Tom referenced a little while ago, for getting policies and procedures for ongoing operation and maintenance. It's so important to keep up with these things, both in terms of preventive maintenance, so that you don't have very costly infrastructure replacements, as well as for environmental protection, cleaning the sumps out where some pollutants can accumulate and whatnot. So I just wanted to share with the commission and really thank again the staff for, we've been sort of talking about this for some time and getting this contract in place and, continuing to work on this. So just a thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. We reiterate your thanks to the staff. My only comment is you have the schedule of proposed meetings for 2021 it was sent to you. Are there any comments, questions, or objections onto that schedule?
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead and adopt it. Can
Sorry,
you-
Chair, I think we need to do a vote for the commission for the 2021 meeting dates.
Well, we'll do a vote then.
I'll move to adopt the schedule as included in the packet for 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
aye,
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? Aye. The chair votes aye. That is the schedule, cast in stone. Who knows whether it'll be in person or not, but
Doubt it.
certainly not for a while.
No.
Is there any public comment, Mr. Gasparo?
There's not.
Thank you. NCTV, would you please turn off the comment chat section of YouTube?
No problem.
And I would ask for a motion to go into executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, to review the enumerated minutes on the agenda for release and to review the minutes for October 13th for review and possible release. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding the Gatto claim where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against the manufacturer of polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, where the chair has determined that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that
Move.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Is there a second?
second,
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
aye,
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? The chair votes aye. Great. Thank you all very much. Now, do we have another link for the executive session? Where did we go?
I was going to ask Lil the same question. I don't know if it's the same or another link. I will give her a call and
Where
find
do
out.
we stay? Does he just shut off the YouTube channel and
Yeah, I don't think we had a separate link this time.
yeah, I don't think we did either.
Let me call Lil and find out how we need to do it.
I didn't see a separate link either. I think we just stay with what we have.
Just check the participants and make sure that we can see the participant list. There's nobody except us and staff. And I just shut off the YouTube, but I can, oh no, it's the YouTube is still running.
Okay, that has to be NCTV, right?
Right.
Kevin, who are you?
Kevin might be Lily's iPad.
Oh,
So Lily said NCTV is just going to cut it off. We're going to stay in this link and they're going to make Lily the host.
okay, because I saw David Mackey there for a second, and now he's gone.
He's-
No,
Oh,
sir,
there
I'm
he
here.
is. There you
Can you
are.
see me?
Sorry, I missed you. Good
That's okay.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mark, are we cut off from YouTube?
No.
No, your YouTube is still live.
Can you cut us off, please?
Yes.
Arthur, you're taking Bobby's job.